Hello and welcome to our vlog series, which is in conversation with the Doctoral College. I'm Deborah Curate and I'm the Research Development Manager from the University of Wolverhampton.
And I'm Ben Halligan, I'm Director of the Doctoral College.
Today's vlog we're going to be looking at conferences, conference calls, and why attending conferences is really important to doctoral students. So Ben, why do you think it's really important to attend conferences?
I think when you start a PhD, one of the first things to do is to find a conference and to attend a conference, because it's an immersion in your discipline in terms of where your discipline is up to. What are the new ideas, what's the new terminology, who are the big names, also meeting other PhD students who are studying within this discipline as well, talking about their experiences at different universities, at different stages of their PhD. It's really an immersion in the whole world of research, and I think that to be exposed to that early on is terribly helpful. Otherwise there's a danger that you might just think you've got your research, you've got your supervisors, you've got your lab, your bench, and that's the circumference of your world, but it really isn't. So a conference really shows you what's going on in your area.
So that's very early on in your doctorate, so that's attending a conference to get to know about the field. But there's also about engaging in conferences from the perspective of a speaker. What would you advise students to do? How do you advise students to go about looking at that position?
So you're thinking of speaking at a conference,
yeah.
So you have a little bit of confidence perhaps from talking about your work to others at your own university, and you think now's the time, maybe your second year or your third year, to deliver a conference paper. The use of that, I suppose, is that it gets your voice into the disciplinary area, and people will come along, they'll listen to what you have to say, they'll give you feedback, they'll develop your ideas. It allows you therefore to road test some of the ideas that you've come up with in terms of your research. For academics, it's a very positive experience to be writing, developing a book or an article, and to present part of that at a conference, and to understand, to take the feedback you get and to help that further develop your ideas and your research. So, in that respect of putting your work out there and getting feedback is useful, but also in a CV respect, that you've spoken at these conferences, that's also really good. And also I think it's quite empowering to do that. The first time you speak at a conference can be quite scary, but after a couple, you feel that you've become part of that scene, part of that organisation, the International Society for the Study of, and it's a bit of a home for you. So it places you in that particular disciplinary field.
So I suppose stepping stone to that might be perhaps giving a presentation with your supervisors, or looking out for, various societies will have days for doctoral students on their annual research conference. So that's usually a day before or a day after the actual big conference, where other PhD students or doctoral students in the field are presenting their work. So those, that's a stepping stone to standing there on your own, giving a presentation, which could be really scary. I mean, you might do that once or twice with your supervisors and then move on, but I think sometimes going to your first conference is really scary. So having that, that backstop, somebody there who helps you negotiate all those questions that you get asked from the audience, which you can answer because it's your research, but you always get a little bit nervous about what you're going to be asked and whether or not you're going to be able to answer them.
That's very true.
So if you're in that situation where somebody asks you a question when you're presenting at a conference, and you think, because often the people who ask you the awkward questions that you can't answer is usually them trying to show off and be a little bit clever, and they're usually talking about their own research rather than yours. How do you deal with those type of people and give them an answer to their question?
Well, as you say, you often get questions that aren't actually questions.
Yeah.
Somebody stands up and says, I'm very interested in your research, but I didn't think this was correct. The way I would have done it is this, that and the other. So you can't really answer that because they're not asking you a question, they're just airing their point of view. There's quite a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
If they ask you a question, it's possible to answer it yourself, but it's possible to ask the questioner to answer it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're disagreeing with my approach, how would you have done it?
Mm-hmm.
Is perhaps a more conversational way of dealing with these things.
So perhaps the knack is learning how to turn those questions into a conversation rather than you being put under the spotlight where you've got questions fired at you.
Indeed,
Thank you.
indeed.
So in order to get to conference, you need to be able to submit an abstract, and that abstract is often peer reviewed. So what are your tips around that process?
So we're talking about the call for papers, CFPs, and you'll find those on mailing lists, on websites, on social media. Every organisation around a certain discipline will probably have an annual conference. It will probably travel from one institution to another, one country to another. So there's quite a lot of calls for papers that are out there, and I think you need to keep an eye out. Typically then, they will give you some information about 200 words, 300 words, contact details, biographical note, but they'll say the themes of the conference are the following. And I think rather than just send some general thing about your work, you need to tie it to one of the themes of the conference. This proposed paper speaks to the theme of X. And then in terms of the proposal itself, in this paper I intend to explore this, that or the other, to show that you're really bouncing off one of these themes, because they will theme the conference accordingly and put you into various panels that deal with each of the themes. I think it's important to understand as well that sometimes conferences are limited in their time and the number of people they can speak. So if you're rejected, it may not be that they don't like, the peer reviewers don't like your proposal. It may just be that they've hit the limit of the number of people they can speak, or it may be that what you're proposing is great in itself, but it doesn't tally with the other proposals they've had in, they have accepted. So it's not necessarily a kind of test and you've passed or you've not, it's just offering to contribute to this particular conference.
Sometimes if you go to a particular honorary society, they have a journal attached to the conference. So if you speak at the conference, you have the opportunity to write for the journal, and that becomes a peer-reviewed abstract and then a journal paper as well. Are there any tips that you would give students about whether it's a good idea to go for those sort of conferences first, work their way up to them, or just go for it?
I would say just go for it, but I would perhaps first of all attend a conference as an interloper, mystery shopper, not a speaker, see what's going on, because it's very interesting to see how other people give presentations, how they talk, what they do with PowerPoint, things like that. So I think once you've got a feel for it and you feel that the time is right, that's when you can speak. And then, there could be a special issue of a journal arising from the conference. It could be that the conference organisers or the editor approaches you, well, very much like your paper, would you consider putting it into an article form that we may consider publishing? And I think that's a really good way of doing it, and will give you the chance not to be sending an article out of the blue to a publisher, to an editor who may or may not accept it, but to understand that you've met the editors, they can give you some feedback, and it's quite a holistic way of doing these things. So
at the University of Wolverhampton, we have an annual research conference, and it's actually compulsory for our students to attend. It's not compulsory for students to present, but we would recommend that they use this as a practice ground and a safe space to start practicing their presentation skills. So here you can present a paper, you could present a paper with your supervisors, you could be part of a symposium, or you could present a poster, and we have a poster competition, so we always say go for the poster competition if you're not going to do anything else, because there are prizes. But what about posters at larger conferences? What's your feeling about those and the value of those?
I think it's a good opportunity, isn't it, to think about ways of visually presenting your research. The posters I don't like, it's solid text.
Yeah.
The posters I do like have attempted to maybe create some graphics to explain what it is that the researcher is doing or what you found. Or sometimes you're working in a particular research area that's quite rich in terms of opportunities for images. You know, you can take photos of the places you're talking about, or the cells that you're looking at, and things like this. And I think it pushes you to think about visual communication. And this is an essential lesson, because when you're at a conference and someone is talking and there's a PowerPoint and it's pages and pages of text, quite boring, quite difficult to follow. I think communication skills are very important for PhD students, and the poster gives you the space to develop those skills.
So at Wolverhampton we do run workshops on how to design a poster. We also run workshops about how to use visual imagery. You can run a workshop on using photography in your research. So we would highly recommend that people come along to those and have a look. I think the beauty of posters are, it doesn't really matter what stage of your doctorate you're at, you can do a poster about it. So even if you're just a couple of weeks into your doctorate, you can develop a poster about your research ideas and what it is that you're going to do and how you're thinking about doing it. And that then gives you the opportunity to have discussions with people about that approach. And often people like to give you advice when they're viewing posters. They like to come and they find posters that they're interested in or relate to their field, and they come and have a bit of a chat with you about that. And people are very good at offering advice, ideas, lessons learned from their experiences of doing research in that field or that way.
Absolutely.
Okay,
so I think we have quite a few ideas there on the use of conferences, getting into conferences, talking at conferences, and what conferences can lend you as a PhD researcher.
So thank you for listening. So this is the end of our blog. We are continuing to develop vlogs, so look out for more vlogs from us next week. Okay, bye.